Goblins. Goblins, goblins, goblins. Images of stingy bankers counting their gold in Gringotts vaults, or putrid masses scurrying through Goblin Town beneath the misty mountains, or the pitiful, vicious cutthroats within the greenskin tribes. But beyond popular fantasy, these creatures and their kind have a long, varied history that extends centuries and encompasses nuanced myth. First mentioned in the written folklore of 12th century Europe as mischievous spirits and wicked creatures, Goblin is a blanket term whose wide net is cast over myriad races of paranatural or fair folk in dozens of cultures. It's impossible to say when exactly such creatures were spoken of, but a rich oral tradition has spread tales of goblin-like beings across global lore. Often depicted as monstrous, numerous, and frightening, these spirits live underground or in dark reaches, possess shape-shifting and magical abilities, and through deception wreak havoc on human settlements. Kobolds, Korrigans, Redcaps, Hobgoblins, Muki, Tokoloshe, the manifold names given to these catch-all beasts parallels their teeming diversity. Though popular media has greatly shaped the image of the goblin, it's an incomplete picture, the bright image of which shines to the exclusion of all others. Within the multiverse of Magic the Gathering, we are witness to the panoply of goblin appearances, temperaments, abilities, and beliefs. This race has proliferated across the blind eternities. It's shaped and in turn been shaped by each plane it's found. And although a broad chasm of drastic differences often separate the goblins of Magic, it's spanned by bridges of similarity that connect most, if not all, of goblin kind. Impish, mischievous, a small frame of sharp claws, razor teeth, and bulbous eyes. This is the image of a goblin in Magic. These creatures skitter by the hundreds in mountain caves. They hunt for treasures. They sow chaos. They are unruly and legion. The goblin creature type has been printed on roughly 490 cards throughout Magic the Gathering's history. Goblin Balloon Brigade, Goblin King, and Mons' Goblin Raiders appeared in the first set Alpha, released in 1993, and presaged a more than 30-year history as one of the game's iconic creatures. Magic's goblins, with a nearly 80% affiliation, are marquee to red mana, and embody wholly the philosophy outlined by this section of the color pie. According to head designer Mark Rosewater, red is freedom through action. This color symbolizes emotion, impulse, and passion. It's the color that sparks creativity, that nourishes ingenuity, but also the color that generates destruction, that blinds with short-sightedness and reckless fury. It is possessed of a conflicting dichotomy under immense pressure, with the capacity for glorious breakthrough and inglorious turmoil. And perhaps no creature manifests red mana more acutely than the goblin. Goblins are diminutive creatures with small bodies that rely on community for confidence and support. Most are found in seething warrens carved within the mountain ranges from which they draw power. Goblins in Magic are exemplars of Red's positive philosophy. Though often ridiculed for low intellect, they frequently invent. They are driven by an innate desire for novelty, and through this demonstrate a clever resourcefulness. Their artificers make intuitive designs, their smiths craft ingenious weapons, their explorers and wayfinders uncover vast treasure. As the flavortext of Goblin Picker tells us, countless generations of Shivan goblins have worked on the mana rig, giving them an unparalleled eye for useful relics. But the goblin is also impeccable in demonstrating Red's negative philosophy, chiefly chaos, destruction, and ill-thought plans. Goblins live in the present, and of that they're only mildly aware. They revel in carnage. They travel in large groups to ransack, break, pilfer, and rummage. Gleefully, goblin hordes demolish anything they don't consider treasure, and sometimes even that isn't safe. As the flavortext of Goblin Raise Runners tells us, finding an unexplored world, they immediately set it on fire. Goblins are a race in motion, never idle. Their clans and tribes constantly war with one another and any outside forces they contact. On one end, the goblins' tenacity is admired. They're often employed as a frenzied vanguard to break resolve and destroy any sort of defensive structure. They're seen as expendable fodder, a weapon of mass destruction that can't be harnessed or commanded, simply guided for maximum damage. Their replaceability and lack of self-care see goblins as a form of ammunition, illustrated in cards like Goblin Bombardment, Goblin Grenade, and Fodder Cannon. Goblins often rely on numerical superiority to take the field, swarming by the thousands. On the other end, goblins are despised for their recklessness, stupidity, and cowardice. They're cheap guides and warriors, true, but you often get far more than you paid, and never in the manner you hoped. Goblins are notoriously unreliable and difficult to train for tasks. They're easily distracted and avaricious. Cards like Goblin Spy and Mog Flunkies illustrate how hopeless these creatures can be. They're also easily cowed or overcome by fear. Goblins prefer direct confrontation only when in a crazed frenzy, or alongside hundreds of companions. More often, they'll scurry into hiding, especially when their bluff is called. We hear this in the flavor text of Goblin Lackey, which reads, "All bark, someone else's bite," and Ib Halfheart, Goblin Tactician, "Everybody but me, charge!" Goblins therefore live in the entertaining paradox of the ingenious idiot. Truly revolutionary ideas and actions are fueled by deadly failures and dramatic explosions. Much of what goblins achieve is accidental, but to creatures without a plan, any outcome satisfies. The goblin persona has given us countless entries that summarize their species well. Just think how strong I'll be if my arms don't tear off. Because fighting is easier than figuring out what else to do. Years of attempts have brought the goblins no closer to growing a sausage tree. And my personal favorite, Goblin Offensive. They certainly are. These attributes and characteristics are common across all goblin kind, but each plane has modified the goblin's foundational essence to produce nuance that distinguishes goblin races from one another. Dominaria, Magic's unofficial heart, teems with great goblin diversity as the race has spread to nearly every inhabitable continent on this vast plane over its fathomless history. Of green skin, small stature, and hallmark pointed features, many Dominarian goblins fit perfectly the creature's classic image. The race has been significant in events across the eons. They represent a wide array of intellect, militant drive, curiosity, and savagery. Most dwell in far-off mountains away from other civilizations, and though many are disorganized and tribal, there are several large, surprisingly advanced goblin communities. During the time of the ancient Thran, goblins were used as slaves to maintain mana facilities and mine for resources. Following the Brothers' War, which culminated in the Dark and Ice Age, feral bands of goblins ravaged field and village, marsh and mountain. So feared were they by humans within the Church of Tal that the Knights of the Thorn, led by Tivadar, launched a genocidal crusade that nearly drove goblins to extinction on Teresiere. The species has since recovered and proliferated, sowing chaos wherever they're found. The Runevelt goblins of Arona are split into multiple tribes and factions that fight amongst each other, but when united by deft leadership, they demonstrate masterful tactics on the battlefield, organizational hierarchy that defies the goblin stereotype, and host a bevy of renowned siege masters. The flavor text of Mons' Goblin Raiders describes the intricate dynamics of Runevelt goblin affairs are often confused with anarchy. The chaos, however, is the chaos of a thundercloud, and direction will sporadically and violently appear. Pashalik Mons was the greatest military mind whose feats continue to echo in Runevelt's lore. More recently, Pashalik's descendant, Rulik, united the Goblin Warrens to confront New Phyrexia's invasion of Dominaria. The Skirk Goblins carve out their dwellings in the southern band of Otaria's Pardic Mountains. Reckless even by Goblin standards, the Skirk toil away in mines and cavern networks deep beneath the earth, where frequent collapses, cave-ins, predator attacks, and lava flows claim dozens daily. Otarian goblins have an affinity for molten earth, using it to shape tools and weapons, and have grown to share its temperament, which we hear in Goblin Warchief. They poured from the Skirk Ridge like lava, burning and devouring everything in their path. Much of Otaria had been devastated by the Mirari and Corona the False God, but the Skirk Goblins refused to be outdone in this regard. Many are the mentions of their destructive violence. The Goblins of Volcanic Shiv have a long history with artifice and metal, having worked on and revered the Thran mana rig for countless generations. They're smart, crafty, ingenious, and their small frames allowed them to clamber throughout the mana rig's vents and pipes, delivering important care when the structure verged on collapse. Shivan goblins carried out their task alongside the island's native Viashino. This dynamic spared many from death as food for Shiv's predatory dragons, though it never stopped entirely. Goblin handicraft and invention have elevated this race to equal among the other species of the Shivan nation and highlight the potential for creation, not just destruction, that goblins possess. Long ago, 5 great empires, one versed in each color of mana, ruled the remote island of Sarpedia. But hubris and circumstance led to their fall. Goblins and orcs were one of the various threats they faced. Sarpedian goblins were a plague that erupted deep within the earth and overwhelmed the proud dwarven empire. They were bestial, fearsome, and longed for war. The goblins and orcs next laid siege to Icacia before they were themselves destroyed by the Thrall swarm. A most peculiar race dwells within the Care ridges of Terisiere, and though not technically goblins, they share striking similarities. The kobolds of Care Keep appear like many of Dominaria's goblins, but are a race unto themselves. They are reckless, insatiable, and inextinguishable. The kobolds maintain their fortress and give sacrifice to Prosh, the dragon whom they worship as a god. The overlap between these two races stems from the goblin catch-all term, and in many real-world folktales, kobolds and goblins are interchangeable. The artificial pocket plane of Wrath, created as a staging area for old Phyrexia's invasion and connected to Dominaria, was birthplace of the Moggs. Phyrexian agents captured goblins from other planes, then tortured, dissected, and distilled them into a new breed of goblin, completely subservient to Phyrexia's whims. Moggs were bred to be large, ruthless, and with no sense of self or intellect. They needed constantly a slave driver or war captain to tell them their task. In cards, this is represented through mechanics that prevent them from attacking or blocking, unless stipulations are met. The Moggs are pitiful. Their breeding and the torture they endure sets them raving against metal and magic alike, which we see in Mogg Sentry. This race was a completely expendable vanguard for the Phyrexians during their invasion, used as fodder and shields to attract the defenders' missiles. Following the first invasion, the surviving Moggs settled in parts of Dominaria and mixed with local goblins. But even now, their descendants retain unique physiques and mindless aggression. Also connected to Dominaria are the Goblins of Mercadia, which were transported to the plane as refugees that fled the Thran Civil War. Mercadian goblins, the Chiron, are physically distinct, having developed taller and thinner frames than most other goblins. They're also quite intelligent, using their minds to calculate opportunities and predict dangers that are ever present in their corrupt, intrigue-riddled court. Through their scheming, the Chiron ruled Mercadia City's government with ruthless efficiency. But for all their progress, they retain ancestral goblin cowardice, which we see in Chiron Sniper and Chiron Glider, the flavor text of which reads, Mercadia's Chiron goblins are the opposite of Dominarian goblins. They're smart and cowardly. The city plane of Ravnica, ruled by its 10 guilds, hosts a diverse race of goblins. These creatures can be found within each of the guilds that shares in red mana, the essential goblin color, 4 in total. The goblins employed by each guild are unique, as is the guild's perspective on goblin kind. The blue and red aligned Izzet League fills its experimental labs with wizards and mages whose mantra is progress no matter the risk, no matter the cost. Izzet goblins fit well into the atmosphere of reckless trials and brazen ingenuity. They're naturally drawn to novelty, they care little for their own safety, and they plan exclusively without foresight. Goblins are often test subjects for audacious wizards, but occasionally their own unconventional methods yield staggering breakthroughs in science and technology. Despite this, many see the goblins as clumsy nuisances. The contempt Izzet mages hold for them can be heard in the flavor text of Crystal Seer. Surprise is a useless, untidy emotion, the plaything of goblins and fools. The militant, red and white-aligned Boros Legion conscripts goblins as shock troops and frontline grunts. They admire goblin zeal, if not their lack of tactical planning. Goblin Banneret and Legion Loyalist illustrate how Boros war leaders effectively direct the race's natural aggression. Still, like the Izzet, Boros soldiers look down on their goblin comrades, a sentiment given by the guild's one-time leader Razia and Boros recruit. Look at this goblin, once wild, untamed, and full of idiocy. The Boros have given him the skill of a soldier and focused his heart with a single cause. Goblins in both the red and black Cult of Rakdos and red and green Gruul clans enjoy an elevated social status, their unextinguishable ardor appreciated by clanmates. This is likely because both guilds most closely align with the goblin race's inherent drive and behavior: to destroy, to sow chaos, to seek new sensations, to embrace the lively present. Rakdos cultists use goblins as opening acts and stagehands for their raucous and macabre theater. Dozens of expendable, often flaming or barbed goblins sacrifice themselves for the crowd's amusement. To them, death is worthy if it leads to awe or applause. The Gruul clans of Rubblebelt wish to tear down civilization and return the plane to its natural state. Anarchy reigns, which attracts the most violent and chaotic of Ravnica's goblins. As shamans, they stoke zeal in others or conjure magic to raise buildings. As warriors, they swarm quaint, peaceful districts, leveling entire streets in their wake. Though allegiance to a guild and their associated colors of mana temper the goblin worldview, ingrained habits aren't entirely extinguished, which we see and hear in the card Goblin Assault Team. Under the veneer of the various guilds, each goblin has the same basic need: to run screaming at the enemy and hit a bunch of stuff. Cards like Gutter Snipe, Goblin Rally, and Lobber Crew demonstrate the goblin's essential drive for destruction, mostly through haphazard means, and hint too at this race's marginalization, which has left many jaded. Guildless and downtrodden goblins across Ravnica gather like moths to Krenko's blazing fire. The self-proclaimed Baron of Tin Street, Krenko runs a syndicate of surprisingly organized crime for goblin standards, and raises the banner of populist sentiment amongst his race. Though he is first among equals, Krenko is genuine in his concern for the goblin plight, and wishes to raise them above beggars, fodder, second class, sentiment which lures hundreds to his ranks. He and his gang strike deals to accrue vast stores of riches. They rule through intimidation, through numbers, and reckless resourcefulness. As the flavor text of Goblin negotiations reads, either you pay for Krenko's protection, or you pay to replace your stall. Either way, you pay. Those guildless not among Krenko's gang often work in forges, factories, spires, any cramped crawlspace or underground network where potential treasure might be found. Lorwyn Shadowmoor, a plane of conflicting idol and despair, is based off of traditional Celtic folklore and has created a rather unique form of goblin. In mythologies of the British Isles, several creatures exist that run parallel to the goblin in many respects. Most notable are the boggart and the puka. Boggarts are described in various and often conflicting ways, but represent a household spirit or other supernatural entity that has been twisted by evil into a life of mischief. Boggarts, unlike traditional goblins, sometimes appear as animals or with animal-like traits such as cloven hooves, tails, snouts, and antlers. Puka, meanwhile, are shapeshifters that can be good or evil, that often prank coastal villages and mariners. Though descriptions of them are vague, a source claims puka are black-looking bad things that come in the form of wild colts. A great mythological synthesis produced Lorwyn's boggarts, amalgamations of the Isle's various goblin lore. In homage to the vague, variegated description of folk boggarts, Lorwyn's goblins are perhaps the most diverse in the Blind Eternities. Their morphologies range from goat or sheep-like with horns to almost reptilian in nature. to their traditional goblin silhouette. Boggarts, unlike most other goblin races, inhabit the sunlit marshes and brackish waters of Lorwyn, which has given them unusual affinity for black mana. Boggart society is loosely organized into familial clans called warrens, each ruled by the oldest and supposedly wisest, called the Auntie. Through fables and tales, the Aunties teach other Boggarts valuable life lessons or skills. They arbitrate and adjudicate. In the card Boggart Sprite Chaser, we hear a section of such a tale. Auntie pointed out to the fairy how much mischief a flying Boggart could wreak, and a beautiful new friendship was born. A Boggart's life can be summed up in 2 words: sensuous and novel. Lorwyn's goblins revel in bombarding their sensations, usually going to great lengths of mischief and destruction to satisfy these urges. Whether smashing things together to produce new sound, crunching on strange mixtures of swamp sludge, or burning buildings to release smoky scents, Boggarts follow an Epicurean maxim of pursuing pleasure, if not with such refinement. But their minds are easily bored. They crave new sensations, novel products of their mayhem. This fills the Boggarts with immense glee, while ruining Lorwyn's countryside as their carnal sweep sows chaos and little else. In the flavortext of Boggart shenanigans, we hear, Boggarts revel in discovering new sensations, from the texture of an otter pellet to the squeak of a dying warren mate. As mentioned, Lorwyn's goblins have a strong attunement to black mana. The addition of black mana doesn't so much suggest evil, but rather the self-centered mindset of the Boggart. An individual goblin's world revolves around themselves and their communal warren. They pursue their goals with no concern for other races. Black mana also strengthens the goblin's connection to death, rot, decay, things that are all prevalent within the brackish warrens and auntie hovels of Lorwyn. Their druids and wizards wear animal bones and concoct lethal poisons from the plains' refuse, which we see in cards like Fodder Launch and Knucklebone Witch. This selfishness, however, only extends beyond the family. Boggarts who hoard their treasures and refuse to share their experiences with others are exiled from their community, shunned for the rest of their lives. When the aurora passes over and transforms endless day into enduring night, the races of Lorwyn likewise transform into Shadowmoor's inverse counterparts. For Boggarts, this means the preservation of red mana as a foundation, but in exchange from black to green mana. This combination shapes the goblins into a ferocious and insatiable race, concerned no longer with mischief for novelty's sake, but rather ravenous consumption. The flavortext of Bloodmark Mentor tells us, Boggarts divide the world into 2 categories: things you can eat and things you have to chase down and pummel before you can eat. They're feral marauders that rove in gangs to feed and pillage. Without coordinated efforts, they rely on pure savagery to overcome foes, which we hear in the flavortext of Horde of Boggarts. Strategies don't come easily to the Boggarts' feral minds, but full-on assault hasn't failed them yet. Interestingly, Shadowmoor gives rise to other races of goblins besides the Boggart. Spriggans, who are larger, often solitary, and even more fearsome, hunt for tasty morsels. Hobgoblins, which have gained in white mana, attempt to take up more civilized, more organized lives than their counterparts. And murderous redcaps stalk dark forests in Shadowmoor's eternal gloom. All of these races fall under the blanket term of goblin, and all are present in some form or another in Celtic folklore. Kamigawa, a plane of myth and legend, heavily inspired by real-world Japanese tradition, is home to a unique race of goblins known as Aki that are equally inspired. Aki generally refers to an evil spirit or a demon. The Aki of Kamigawa also draw from the folklore of yokai and other Japanese kami. Tengu, in Japanese myth, are long-nosed, often red of skin, and frequently inhabit mountain ranges. The Kappa, a supernatural creature that dwells near rivers and lakes, has a back adorned with shell-like protections. Kamigawa's Aki goblins are a unique visual blend of these traditional images, which are beautifully illustrated in the Raider and Underminer. Goblins of the plain live in warrens and cave networks carved deep into the cliffs of Sokanzan Mountain. These dangerous and hectic creatures live alongside Kamigawa's ogres. The two species are territorial and attack all who walk the mountain range. Aki are exclusively tied to red mana, which emphasizes their powerful connection to the plane's magmatic activity. Goblin tunnels ring with industry and mining as they smelt lava, and their mages are adept at shaping fire's anger, seen in cards like Sokanzan Smelter and Aki Coal Flinger. Their turtle-like shells are lava-resistant and heat-proof, protecting the scurrying goblins from their own negligence. Though they share Sokanzan with some of the plane's reclusive ogres, the Aki don't share the ogre's affinity for communion with Kamigawa's Oni spirits. Some red-aligned demons do patrol the mountain peaks, though how the goblins perceive them is uncertain. The most infamous Aki was Kikijiki, the Mirror Breaker. A wily magical adept, Kikijiki was exiled by his own clan and through chance happened upon the lair of Keiga, the Tide Star, and Kamigawa's blue-aligned dragon spirit. The dragon felt Kikijiki's mystical potential and tasked him with retrieving its pearl, stolen by the Soratami Moonfolk. He happened across a hall of enchanted mirrors and broke free his reflected self. This earned him the moniker Mirror Breaker, and after returning to Keiga, the dragon helped hone his skills in illusion. There are several other planes in which goblins appear, but don't play as large a role in society, or are else smaller in number. Goblins inhabit the Shard of Jund on the sundered plain of Alara. Jund is a land of aggressive growth, of savage nature and raw bestiality, steeped in red, black, and green mana. Nature is the only order. Those strongest and quickest prey on the weak and timid. Such barbaric environs inculcate Jund's ferocity within its inhabitants, and goblins are no exception. The race here is simpler, more animalistic and violent than on other planes. They become this way out of necessity. Goblins fall into the lowest category of Jund's food chain. Their small frames and relative weakness make them ideal prey for the Shard's other races and lurking predators. Sheer numbers ensure goblin survival. In massive groups, they scurry out on hunting sorties to overwhelm whatever food they can find. They worship Jund's apex predator, the dragon, as a god and willingly offer themselves up for sacrifice. Even among goblin kind, they are the most uncivilized. The furry goblins of Tarkir are most at home within the Mardu Horde and the Temur Frontier, two clans that share in red mana. Mardu goblins are impetuous and desire the swift conflict that all within the Horde do. Their manes are reddish in appearance, which separates them from Temur goblins. These white-furred creatures scurry in the frontier's frozen mountains and make dwellings near pits of lava. When the timelines were altered and dragon lords reigned over Tarkir, goblins were an easy source of food for the winged predators, which we see in cards like Dragon Fodder and Dragonlord's Servant. The Arthurian-inspired plane of Eldraine hosts a race of goblins known as Redcaps. This name is derived from the British Isles, where in traditional lore these fearsome creatures lurked near battlefields and hamlets, ruthlessly murdered, then stained their caps red with their victims' blood. Thieves and raiders, Redcaps make aggressive raids into the realm from the wilds to feed both avarice and sadism. The Redcap is universally despised, but Eldraine's dwarves hold the greatest enmity as they fight constantly over rule of the Plains Mountains. Goblins on the metallic plane of Mirrodin resided within the Oxida mountain range. Though, like most goblins, they were largely chaotic and anarchist. Loose social and religious structures developed. The largest of Mirrodin's clans was the Krark clan, named after the exile and wandering mystic Krark, who claimed to have found another world within Mirrodin's hollow core. Artificers, metallurgists, and engineers, the Krark clan used plentiful metal to make explosive, often deadly breakthroughs. Their haphazard crafting heard in the flavortext of Krark clan engineers. Well, I jammed the what's-it into the wackadoodle, but I think I broke the thingamajigger. Destruction was integral to goblin life. Fertility rituals and religious sacrifices revolved around melting down scrap or breaking shiny things. Kuldotha, the Great Furnace, held special significance as a holy place of their deity, the Great Mother. When new Phyrexia consumed Muradin, corrupted goblins found work within Urabrask's forge, where they continued to do what they did best: melt, destroy, create, and proliferate. Two varieties of goblin exist on the plain of Ixalan, a land of Mesoamerican discovery and beauty. The first, which dwell on the surface, are reminiscent of monkeys, with furred bodies and long, prehensile tails to assist in climbing and balancing. Surface goblins run wild in Ixalan's dense canopies, but some find purpose and pleasure among the pirates of the Brazen Coalition. Curious by nature, with an eye for shiny treasures, goblins are used by the Coalition to unearth jewels, to assist in rigging masts and boons, and as an aggressive vanguard on daring raids. As the flavortext of Wily Goblin tells us, goblins climb and swing with ease, whether through a pirate ship's rigging or a tree's branches. The second breed are endemic to Ixalan's vast network of underground caverns, the treacherous roots of which lead to the plane's hollow core. Pallid, translucent skin and bulging eyes are hallmark of this race, which resemble lizards more than monkeys. The deep goblins are predatory and insular, living in remote, small communities. Their time underground has precipitated a shift in color alignment from red to black. They've retained their penchant for baubles, but instead of gold, they hoard bones, which we see in Deep Goblin Skulltaker. Zendikar, a plane of primordial growth and raw power, hosts goblins that have adapted well to its unpredictable danger. Zendikari goblins have long, pointed noses and ears, with elongated arms compared to many other goblin races, which helps them navigate the plane's verticality. Simpler than most, the goblins here produce few great innovators or artificers. Instead, they shine in their reckless bravery and curious impulse, succinctly phrased in the flavortext of Blade Tusk Boar. Those who dare stand in its path are either brave or mindless, or, in the case of goblins, both. Due to their desire for exploration, goblins are used by expeditions as guides and shortcutters, often finding small workarounds through the most dangerous environments Zendikar offers. But they're still goblins, and one should limit how much faith they place in their guide. As Samila of the Marasa Expeditionary House states, goblins are cheap, but be careful. It's a lot easier to steal from a corpse than a customer. Outside of guides, goblins are effective treasure hunters, miners, and within their own communities, powerful shamans who wield the gas and magma of Zendikar's volcanic fissures. 3 are among the most prominent of Zendikari goblin tribes. The Tuk-Tuk tribe, named after their valiant leader who returned from an expedition as a reborn golem, are artificers and relic seekers. They don't understand the ways of the Hedron network, the old temples of the Eldrazi, the power of ancient ruins, but they explore and gather them all the same. Tuk-Tuk Scrapper and Goblin Arsonist show this tribe's use of the ever-present Hedrons. The Lava Steppe tribe is based on the mountainous hellscape of Akum, and are the most religious and militant of the goblins. Inured to the constant heat, Lava Steppe goblins have a thick hide that resists wounds and elements. The Grotag tribe dwell within the forested crags of Balagad, where they demonstrate a unique proclivity for domesticating Zendikar's wild beasts. Many lizards and insects are used as mounts in exploration or combat, which we see in cards like Grotag Thrasher and Goblin Roughrider. The more intrepid Grotag goblins can be found in markets and settlements across Zendikar, trading wares, information, and sundry to support their tribe. Thanks so much for watching and listening to this study in Mischief, as we've explored the goblins of Magic the Gathering. Let me know what you think about goblins, and which plane species you find most interesting, as well as suggestions for future videos in the comments below. And if you're a fan of lore and storytelling, be sure to subscribe to the channel where content is uploaded frequently. I want to take a moment to thank all of my patrons over on Patreon. Your support is greatly appreciated and helps the channel improve. If you'd like to become a lore luminary for access to me, a great community, written scripts, and early video drops, head to patreon.com/thelorebrarians to learn more. Until next time, go forth and explore the lore.